I'm now going to talk through some of the requirements and specifics for DSPs with add-on marketplaces. So not the add-on developers themselves, but the digital service providers that are connected to the ATO and operating an add-on marketplace. So with the introduction of the SAM and the revision of parts of the operational framework questionnaire, we're effectively heading down a path where self-assessment will become the norm for add-ons that are certified by a DSP and integrate with a DSP that ultimately connects through to the ATO. So DSPs, from a best practice perspective, are expected to have a certification standard in place for their third-party apps. It needs to be documented, and it needs to take into account some of the dimensions and factors that are covered off in the SAM. The add-ons should be asked to self-assess against this standard, and they should be asked to do it once a year at least. And the DSPs have an obligation to review the compliance of their add-ons against their particular standards. The hope, as Simon said, is that the self-assessment process should begin to standardize so that the amount of work or effort that a software developer needs to do to integrate with Xero, Intuit, MYOB, and other players should be quite consistent. So we're not having to reinvent the wheel each time. And one of the challenges for DSPs that I put to you is, at what point do you begin to accept each other's security assessments and standards to help support this? All of the DSPs in Australia are administered or regulated in part by the Digital Partnerships Office at the ATO. As part of that, they're sent an annual questionnaire as they recertify under the operational framework. As Terry talked about earlier, there'll be some questions added to the operational framework questionnaire. I've got a sneak peek of them in blurry picture form, thanks to Terry. The first one is DSPs will be asked, do you have an add-on marketplace that allows third parties to consume your APIs? Yes or no? Straightforward question. What we're trying to do is paint a picture of the ecosystem that's integrating and connecting through to the ATO and other government systems. DSPs that answer yes to that question will then get some extra questions that they need to work through in section E. The first one is, do you have security controls in place to govern your third-party add-ons? Yes and no. If you do, please provide a list of documentation. And the beautiful thing about the SAM is effectively it's a templated set of documentation and a set of rules that a DSP can apply to govern and regulate their ecosystem. At the same time, in the initial cut of the operational framework questionnaire, so the next round of revisions that are due to go out probably before the end of the year, Terry, is that a fair statement?
Yes, we're looking to publish the questionnaire probably in the next 2 weeks, but we'll be expecting developers to provide us the additional information as part of their annual review process.
So in that, there's a question or a section asking DSPs to provide a list of the third-party add-ons that integrate with their API with more than 1,000 Australian small business connections and or a connection to an Australian tax agent or practice. So what we're talking about is give us a list of all of the third-party add-ons that have integrated, have more than 1,000 connections via API to a DSP's ecosystem, or connect to the practice client list of a tax agent or BAS agent, because what we know is that that's a honeypot of personally identifiable information and sensitive tax information. So the ATO wants to help build a risk profile to understand who those players are and what how many connections they have, or which ones have more than 1,000 connections or are connected to practices. Who needs to be reported? As I said, third parties, more than 1,000. Practice add-ons connecting to a client list, regardless of how many connections. We want to be able to build a very clear picture of the size and the scale of the ecosystem and the participants. You don't need to report the number of connections, you just need to report that they are connections, if that makes sense. The disclosure responsibilities also change for DSPs. You're going to need to give the DSPs a list, but in future, the DSPs will be asked for the following by the DPO. The date the self-assessment was last completed by each add-on. So when did the add-on self-assess against the DSP's security standards? And confirmation from the DSP that they approved that self-assessment. So when did the DSP approve the self-assessment from that add-on? And details of any outstanding matters. This is covering things such as breach reporting. The ATO expects to be informed when DSPs are compromised. DSPs need to be informed if their add-ons are compromised, because one weak link breaks the whole chain for all of us. And we're trying to keep people's data safe here. In terms of breach reporting, DSPs under the operational framework are required to report any data or identity security breach of their own environment to the DPO. if they have an add-on marketplace, they must also report any data or security breach of that third-party add-on that's connected to their ecosystem as well. So if you're a DSP operating a marketplace, you may need to revise and review your terms and conditions for your APIs to meet these requirements, because under the operational framework, you're going to have to tell the ATO. And bear in mind, we also have mandatory breach reporting obligations in Australia in some cases as well. In terms of implementation, we're now facing a situation where the add-on marketplaces will be included as part of the standard annual review process for the operational framework by the DPO. The updated security questionnaire, as DSPs come up for their annual review, they'll be asked to fill in the security questionnaire again and answer or update any information. And as we know, a number of DSPs are due to begin recertification against the operational framework before the end of this calendar year.